I know there are 5 reasons on this list, but it can be boiled down to one. Spoiler alert, this game pisses me off! What's up everybody, Skywarp72 with Cruisers Gaming, and today I'm gonna delve into the top 5 reasons that Need for Speed, missed the mark, so to speak. Before we get into that though, let's take a moment and click that subscribe button and the bell icon to stay up to date on all sorts of car-based goodness, and check out the description below for links to the Cruisers Discord, Facebook group, and Patreon. I thank you all for your continued support. Lastly, a shout out to JJDX24 for gifting me Need for Speed over Christmas. Probably only doing so he could hear me rant over it, which is what I'm about to do. Aesthetically, I think this is the best looking Need for Speed that the modern age of Need for Speeds has to offer. Of course, that's up for debate, as your taste may lean towards the all-night driving of the 2015 version, or the bland sepia tones of the desert offered in Payback. Therein lies where Heat really pisses me off, however. They finally get the aesthetics right and make the game look fun to play. And then the game's not any fun to play. Let's start this list, shall we? Unclear routes. Going over 150 miles an hour in the game is fun. The blur rate, to give the feeling of going fast, to me seems much higher than it was in recent iterations of the game. This, however, in the daytime will have you double checking your minimap, as the blur rate can make marked corners come up way too fast to react for. Ghost Studios may have saw this and put a little directional arrow above every checkpoint, but not every turn has a checkpoint during races. Not to mention that some of the racing routes contain corners that are both unmarked and contain a split in the road, leaving you to wonder which way the racing route is.
We're tired of being your trail donkeys, acting like you some one-man GPS. God damn it! We lost! We fucking super lost, man!
This becomes a huge problem when night racing and you can't look down to your minimap in fear of hitting oncoming traffic. I found myself more often than not having to run a single race multiple times to better learn the route, making the game even more repetitive than it already is. Soundtrack. I'm a sucker for a well thought out soundtrack that not only goes well with the game, it also goes well in my personal playlist. In a game that centers around driving fast, it should have a soundtrack to match. It doesn't have to be limited to one genre of music. Anything from speed metal to house music can work. I mean, look at the great soundtracks of the old Need for Speeds that were provided by Junkie XL. I get that it takes place in Miami, though the slow, dull, urban soundtrack does nothing to get your adrenaline flowing. Control freak. Use the clutch, Luke, was a Star Wars reference that Need for Speed themselves used when they dropped a much-needed manual with clutch update to the 2015 iteration that at the time had only featured an automatic transmission in-game. While it's crazy to think of a racing game not offering a manual with clutch transmission option in a world where sim-style racing is taken over, apparently Need for Speed missed their own damn memo about it. Heat does offer a manual transmission, minus a clutch, but it's only offered in one controller configuration with the up and down shifters located on the left and right bumpers. This, of course, is wildly frustrating, as I have the upshift, downshift, and clutch all on the letter pad in Forza Motorsport, Forza Horizon, Grid, hell, even Wreckfest. Sure, you can reconfigure some fancy controllers on the fly, but reconfiguring a normal controller in the Xbox settings is a shit show, an agonizing process that when switching games, you also have to switch the controller as well. It's too much. When driving cars in real life, one does not look for the shifter on the e-brake or even the rear view mirror. So why does Need for Speed insist on putting the shifter there? Grinding progression. When it was announced that Need for Speed Heat was dropping the microtransaction-based progression that Payback had, all players rejoiced. That rejoicing, however, was short-lived once the game came out and everyone had to grind on the game back and forth between the daytime and nighttime cycles, which, frankly, again, is exhausting. It's so much of a grind to get the bank during the day and the rep at night, I often just got tired of playing the game and moved on to something else. In-game, the reason for this is happening is because apparently the local speed shop won't sell you parts unless you have a high reputation. Mind you, brick-and-mortar speed shops are rapidly becoming a thing of the past, and those speed shops, they need sales. So believe me when I tell you, they'd sell your grandma a nitrous kit if it meant them making a sale. In a game that references social media so much, and your playable character almost always has their phone in their face, how can ordering online not be a thing? Your character and the NPCs being such car people, and they never heard of Summit? They never heard of Jegs?
Jegs! Nobody beats Jegs.com. Choose from millions of name brand parts.
Before we get to number one, a dishonorable mention goes out to the fact that I can't believe game developers haven't figured out that players would like to have all their cars displayed in one place, hence their garage. 2015's Need for Speed did it, though it was just 5 cars at a time. One of my favorite things to do is move cars around in my own personal real-life garage. What's the point of having a garage in-game that's big enough to hold 10 cars, but only being able to see or work on one at one time? Grand Theft Auto has gotten this for better than a decade. In games like Need for Speed, where you can add such personality to the cars with parts and liveries, don't they get that we want to see all these cars together? Gimmicky driving style to get the car to corner? Check. Unrealistic grip to a point where there's none at all? Check. Decent handling at high speeds until you need to dodge an oncoming car? Check. Ever since 2015's Need for Speed has had this gimmick while driving about slamming the brakes and then gassing it to induce a power slide, Ghost Studios has refused to let go of it. Like I said in my last Need for Speed Heat video, however, this driving style isn't indicative to how you actually drive a car. And while I get that it's an arcade-based driving idea, if you're not going to have players drive it like they would an actual car, then what's the point in paying licensing fees for real-life cars in the game? At that point, you might as well give us fantasy cars like Wreckfest and Burnout does. The driving aspect is the absolute worst out of any of the modern Need for Speed games, taking an unloved driving gimmick from 2015 and Payback and somehow frickin' making it worse. The engine speed sounds are so off from what the car is doing, it almost always sounds like you're a gear too high while running manual transmission. The steering is inconcise at best until it decides it wants you to use its drift gimmick at speed, at which point the steering becomes kind of a used-up suggestion. That same steering will seemingly kind of work until you need to steer clear of an NPC car on the road. And like its 2 predecessor games, Heat seems to do its best and send the steering on an extended vacation and draw you right into the traffic cars. The aforementioned blur rate won't let you take your eyes off the road to check the minimap, which often leads to missing corners that aren't clearly marked and having to start over. Doing all that for a majority of the races and grinding the races out has just left me more often switching games out of frustration. Look, I'm not saying Need for Speed physics have to be on par with Project Cars 2. But just a normal driving mode would have made this beautifully aesthetic game actually enjoyable. So, do you guys agree, or do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Pick a side! And I really want to hear what you guys have to say. Like today's video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Considering this channel is mostly Forza based, I usually need some help getting Need for Speed videos in front of some new eyeballs. Last but not least, if you're in a position to help the channel grow, consider becoming a member of the Cruisers Patreon, where you can get cool Cruiser swag, tight window stickers for your car. God, I'm screwing the script up so bad. It's late, guys. I'm going to bed. Thanks for watching, my friends. And remember, those friends, they're the family you get to choose. I'll see you later, fellow Cruisers.